If you're sending artillery pieces and tanks to Ukraine, and you're not replacing them, you are not capable of producing an effective warfighting capability in Britain. And the way, coming back to the escalation point, the way to manage escalation is to leave Putin in absolutely no doubt that if he escalates, we can deal with that, and we're strong enough to deal with that, and we're prepared to deal with that. And all the hot air and discussion and noise about the British defence budget at the moment,
yes,
is and the refusal to recognise this is sending a signal of weakness, which is ultimately going to reassure Putin
yes,
that it was pretty predictable stuff. Bluster, anger, extraordinary statements saying that the Russians launched the attack to stop NATO attacking Russia. All pretty standard stuff. But there's a dangerous message here of escalation, nuclear saber rattling. And I guess the message is that we mustn't blink, that we have to absolutely continue to double down, as Prime Minister Sunak said at the weekend in Munich. But he's got to double down because we haven't done it yet.
Now, Richard, a lot of people are interpreting what we heard from Vladimir Putin as preparing Russia for the long haul in the war in Ukraine. Now, if that is so, it does suggest maybe that Putin has a much more realistic grasp on the outlook for the war in the days and weeks and however long ahead. Certainly a lot more realistic than his expectations at the start of the invasion a year ago.
Yes, but I don't think that. I mean, he's realized, of course, a year later, the penny's finally dropped, that this is not a special military operation leading to a Russian victory. The Russians have been very firmly on the back foot.
Yes.
Although, to be fair, they have regained the initiative with their current offensive in the Donbass. But all the indications are that they will not be able to exploit that into any significant advantage, that the Ukrainians should be able to hold the line, albeit they might take the odd tactical reverse, and it won't impact ultimately on a Ukrainian counteroffensive when they're ready to do so.
Right. I mean, how far can we, I don't know, be at all confident that Russia has pretty much done its worst? I mean, we know here in the last couple of weeks that 98% or something of the Russian army are committed in Ukraine, but we haven't seen the worst of the Russian air effort yet, have we? Could there be a push beyond anything we've seen so far, or have we basically absorbed in Ukraine, the Ukrainian military, pretty much the worst of what Russia has to offer?
I think it's too early to tell, and I don't think we should. We mustn't count any chickens yet. It's too early. But I think the absolute message is to continue to ramp up the supply of weaponry, and I think we should also mention President Biden's speech in Warsaw.
Yeah,
and he's had a pretty impressive 2 days, I think, with Kiev yesterday and Warsaw today. This is good presidential. A president of the USA leading NATO as it should be led, and this is great news. But I come back to my point about doubling down, because there's an equation here. The quicker that Ukraine gets the tools to do the job, the quicker they can put together the necessary offensive. And we should take nothing for granted here. I mean, this is going to be really difficult, because it's going to be breaking into well-established Russian positions, defensive positions, minefields, and the like. So this isn't going to be, in any sense, an easy nut to crack.
Yes.
But the quicker the war ultimately is going to be over, the more the West dribbles stuff in on a sort of incremental basis, the longer it's going to last.
Yes.
The greater the danger that it becomes frozen into a sort of attritional stalemate. So it is in everybody's interest who want to see the fighting stopped, to double down. And doubling down, as again I mentioned Prime Minister Sunak said at the weekend, it's all very well to say double down, but the British have got to do it as well. And that doesn't just mean providing significant amounts of military assistance, yes,
yeah,
but it also means looking to our own defenses. And that is a critical weakness at the moment from this government. The British Army is in bits, is completely underfunded. The defense budget is skewed. We've got white elephants of aircraft carriers, which are no good in a European war, frankly. And we've got to look to our own defenses. And this is really serious.
Yeah. I mean, there'll be those who argue that the investment, to call it that, of British military hardware into the Ukrainian military effort, that is a very good investment in that it depletes the strength of the potential enemy. And to that extent, well, you could say it's worth in the short term seeing a shift in resources from Britain's stores here at home and in the normal theatres and places where British military hardware is stationed into Ukraine, because it does the job there. And it does so, without sounding cynical, without any loss of British life or risk.
Yeah, but John, it does absolutely. It is reinforcing the Ukrainians in exactly the same way, the way you described, but it also depletes our own capability. If you're sending artillery pieces and tanks to Ukraine and you're not replacing them, you are not capable of producing an effective warfighting capability in Britain. And the way, coming back to the escalation point, the way to manage escalation is to leave Putin in absolutely no doubt that if he escalates, we can deal with that, and we're strong enough to deal with that, and we're prepared to deal with that. And all the hot air and discussion and noise about the British defence budget at the moment,
yes,
is and the refusal to recognise this is sending a signal of weakness, which is ultimately going to reassure Putin that it is hot air. So, this is critical stuff.
Well, that's an important point, and no doubt one that will be echoed by, well, among others, the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace. I want to just finally get a thought for you on the strength of the alliance. Just finally, let's have a little listen back to some of what Joe Biden had to say in Warsaw.
For free people refuse to live in a world of hopelessness and darkness. This has been an extraordinary year in every sense. Extraordinary brutality from Russian forces and mercenaries. They've committed depravities, crimes against humanity, without shame or compunction. They've targeted civilians with death and destruction, used rape as a weapon of war, stolen Ukrainian children in an attempt to steal Ukraine's future, bombed train stations, maternity hospitals, schools, and orphanages. No one can turn away their eyes from the atrocities Russia is committing against the Ukrainian people. It's abhorrent. It's abhorrent. But extraordinarily, as well, has been the response of the Ukrainian people and the world. 1 year after the bombs began to fall, Russian tanks rolled into Ukraine. Ukraine is still independent and free.
It's Joe Biden speaking in Warsaw then just earlier today. General Sir Richard Shirreff, that sort of speech from Joe Biden there, obviously of enormous value to morale in Ukraine. But I wonder, what about the material effect in stiffening the spine of the European and NATO alliance?
Well, I think it's a rallying cry for the NATO alliance as well, and it's fine stuff. But again, on the positive side, the NATO alliance remains strong. I mean, I've just come back from Budapest, which, of course, Hungary is by no means as committed as many others, has not provided any direct military support, and Prime Minister Orban is keen to keep out of it, frankly, and is a bit of a friend of Putin. But nevertheless, even Hungary is signed up to the NATO line of providing the support necessary and will not break ranks. So, the NATO alliance is strong. But speeches like that, the one we just heard from Mr. Biden, will only strengthen it and continue to strengthen resolve. And it needs to. I mean, the nations of NATO are signed up to this, but the populations of NATO are not necessarily signed up to this. I mean, the German support for the war down at about just over 50%. So you can't take it for granted. It remains pretty high in this country, which is good.